Hello and welcome to our kitchen table. I'm sitting here with my wife, your therapist, and today we're going to be talking about raising neurodivergent kids once again. So if you didn't listen to part 1 of this interview with Courtney Clement Bowles, a child therapist who specializes in working with neurodivergent kids, please go back and do that. And I think the idea here is to just jump us back into the conversation, Ash, that you were having with Courtney from last week.
Yep, we'll pick right back up where the last one left off.
So not that it's super relevant for an interview that I wasn't in, but my name is Price, and I married your therapist.
My name is Ash, and I'm your therapist. Please keep in mind that even though this is a podcast about therapy and mental health, it's not the same thing as or a replacement for therapy.
I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this conversation with Courtney.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Now moving over to sympathetic, how is a parent noticing that their kid is in a sympathetic nervous system state, and what are they doing about it to help regulate?
I think when people first hear about sympathetic, they usually think of fighting, yelling, things like that.
Yeah.
And that's all true. But it's also racing thoughts, right? Ruminating,
Yep.
constant questions. Why? I'm just basically in a mobilized state. Everything, I'm just feeling a lot of things.
Yep. Being disagreeable to stuff and
Can be.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely can be. I think just a lot of people think of they're hitting, they're yelling.
Yeah.
And that is
thinking of actual fight or flight. They're running or they're yelling. Yeah.
yes. And that absolutely is the case sometimes. But other times it might be the child that's, having trouble going to bed and they have a million questions at night and they're worried about things. Maybe something happening, right? That is when you're in this mobilized nervous system state.
That why to me is so important to recognize that can be a part of dysregulation. As an autistic person, that is definitely a way that we're regulating. We're asking questions, we're figuring out our environment, we're trying to make it all make sense at once. And I think understanding, because oftentimes that's treated as a misbehaving sort of thing. It's rude to keep asking why.
Yeah.
So this is just a behavior we need to work with, not a sign that you might be feeling dysregulated right now.
Yeah. And so, when you're asking why, right? You're dysregulated. You're trying to regulate yourself. You're doing the work. You're
right.
I'm trying to do the
help
thing.
me do it.
Yeah.
I'm asking. Yeah.
And so what we wouldn't want to do in that situation is because I said so.
Yes.
Right. Or you don't need to know the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we can answer questions, right, thoroughly and thoughtfully, without engaging in this back and forth, well, why this? Okay, this, right? If we give thoughtful responses, if we think, and we're mindful about how we answer these questions, maybe we ask, I wonder why you were thinking about that.
I was going to say something to get to the root of that. I'm wondering if you're worried about our trip this weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk it through. Do you want to know about our plan or our schedule instead of just answering each why question as they come? Because there could be a lot.
Yes. And that's exhausting.
Yeah.
And right. And we were talking about parents who are parenting these neurodivergent kids. They're becoming dysregulated. They may be neurodivergent themselves, and that's dysregulating to them. Right. So it's it's exhausting and can be very overwhelming.
Yeah.
So I think this is where the reactive parenting versus responsive parenting kind of comes in.
Okay. Yes.
I'm going to be responsive. I'm going to pause. I'm going to think through my response versus just reacting. So I'm not just answering the question, right? I'm being thoughtful about this. I'm thinking through, okay, and why would my child be asking this? You know, maybe they need help regulating. Maybe this is a sign I'm going to connect.
It's that pause. It's taking a a second to notice, like, where am I? Am I feeling activated as well? Because oftentimes when there's something going on in the home, like, we're all a little bit dysregulated. Price and I tend to have bad days on like the same damn day because like we're both feeling frustrated. There's that energy in the home. And so like taking a second to notice for yourself and then asking yourself those questions for your kiddo too. Could this be because they're feeling dysregulated? What could this be about? That sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that sympathetic usually gets a really bad rap. Like it's like, I mean, again, when we're thinking about like maybe hitting, we're yelling, we're making, we're showing, right, that we're dysregulated in a very obvious way. It's not. Like it's not a bad state. We're all going to be in it. I mean, we need that state. Like that's survival.
Right. It's a survival state. It's so important. And it's also the state you go to when there's a deep belief in your system that like you can do something about the environment you're in. Like it's such a hopeful, beautiful thing to have a dysregulated kid who's in that activated, showing that state. That's like, I still believe that if I show the adults in my life that I'm upset or that something's going on, that they'll notice and want to do something about it. That shutdown, I feel like, is sometimes occurring. Not for all kids. It can be different, and we all go into both. But sometimes that shutdown state is like, nobody responds to me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not getting connection when I need it.
Yeah.
And so I'm withdrawing. I'm having to, like, go into my own brain and live there instead of getting help with this.
Yeah, it's that like learned helplessness piece.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about, and we can keep tying in like the reactive and responsive parenting, but I want to talk about co-regulation. What is co-regulation? First of all, what does that even mean?
It's regulating with someone. And one of my favorite things I like to talk about with parents, so when we talk about co-regulation, because usually I have like, you know, people coming in, like they need to learn how to self-regulate because that's what parents are told. Like, oh, your child needs to self-regulate.
Yes.
I mean, literally infants. Your child needs to self-soothe.
Oh, it's so sad to hear that. And it's such typical advice. Like it's so common.
Yes.
You need to let your infant self-soothe or else they'll never learn how to do it.
Yes. And so parents are, you know, of course they come to therapy. Okay, well, we need some skills, right? Because whatever they're doing at home isn't working. And so they need some help. And I get to be the one to say, like, actually, let's bust that myth because we co-regulate all throughout our lives.
So adults co-regulate all throughout their lives.
Yeah. I mean, when we like pick up the phone and call a friend or we ask for a hug, you know, we are co-regulating.
Yes.
That is what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And usually parents have this like moment and they're like, oh, like, so I'm not a bad parent that my child can't self-regulate.
Yes.
I'm like, no.
I think in traditional parenting models, like a lot of the stuff that's been suggested for so long is asking kids to do things that we do not even ask adults to do. I'm allowed to have a bad day as a grown-up. I'm allowed to be grumpy. Other adults get what that is. I can just be like, I'm just having a bad day. And nobody's like, well, just have a good one. Well, men sometimes are like, have a good, but you know.
Just smile.
Just smile. But nobody's like, just have a better day.
Yes.
People are like, I get it.
Yeah.
But we ask kids to do that. And yeah, I think that we also have this expectation that kids should be able to self-regulate, but we as adults need to do that together with other people all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just setting your kid up for failure, right?
Yeah.
If the goal is to like just self-regulate, well, that's not a goal that we're going to reach, right?
Yeah.
But then we might reach the shutdown mode. That's what we could do.
Yeah, and that might look great. Again, that might look like having a very obedient child. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that down the road so often. There are a couple of clients who come to mind who, when they're feeling really dysregulated, they need to step away from the session. They want to like go figure it out themselves. And not only is that like not the point of therapy, you're allowed to come to therapy and be upset, but also I'm recognizing that this is their safe place and there is no point in their life where they're getting to co-regulate with anybody. And every single time when we look back at their past as a kid, there was a parent who wasn't able to bear their big feelings, who like wanted them to go deal with that by themselves, go to their room or go do whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I I think that, and I always do, have to acknowledge that, like, being with a child who is dysregulated, who is needing co-regulation, is not necessarily easy.
It's
right?
hard. Yeah. Yeah.
So, honoring and just acknowledging, like, where your own nervous system state is very, very important.
Yep.
And pausing, going back to, like, not being reactive, but being responsive is crucial in that step.
Yeah. So does that mean, how do you help a kid co-regulate? I feel like so much of that looks like, I see like parents on TikTok like just hugging and holding their kids, but then the people I'm talking to are like, I am touched out. Again, often the like neurodivergent parents, they're like, I literally, like, I don't want to be in the same room with them, which they hate to admit. Like, I don't want to be in the same room with them when they're acting that way, much less like hold them close to me. Are there other things that people can do when they're feeling overwhelmed and dysregulated themselves and are touched out, but also need to help like co-regulate with their kids?
Yeah. I encourage parents to, like, find space to be with their child, and how that looks is dependent on their comfort level.
Okay.
So maybe it is holding their child. Maybe that's comfortable for them and the child. I will say a lot of the times, because again, working with like neurodivergent kids and maybe neurodivergent parents, touching is sometimes no. Right? It's like, nice idea.
Literally
right?
the last thing I need right now. Thanks.
Good in theory, but not what I need. And
your hug is a prison. I don't want it.
yeah. And so, okay, cool. We don't need to hug each other. We don't need to touch each other to co-regulate.
Yeah.
So I'll encourage parents to, like, just sit with their child. And that's what I do in the play therapy room. I'll even show them, right? If there's a really dysregulated child, I'm not trying to, like, extinguish the behavior again, right? I'm not trying to do that immediately. I'm just trying to communicate with the child without my words, like with just my presence, that I'm here. Like, your big feelings, they don't scare me. They're welcome here. You're allowed to have them. And so having the parent just sit in the room. Now, that's like, that can be a lot, right? So what are some things that like neurodivergent parents can have? There are like the loop earplugs, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe your own tool to regulate yourself. Maybe a fidget. Maybe like whatever you do. Maybe it's rocking. And honestly, you're modeling to that child, like, ooh, I use my skills, you can use yours. And like, it's all.
Not that your goal as an adult is to be completely free from all like helpful tools and skills and you'll just be like zen all of the time. But like, man, when things are really noisy, I need my loop earplugs, and that's okay. And you can have your earplugs too. And this is a tool we can both have. And even when you're a grown up with your own kids, you can have your tools and skills. Like, you're going to need them. And that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it makes me think about how people will often say, like, well, this is the real world, right? They're going to need to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, in the real world, they are going to need all of these tools to be able to navigate it. So let's teach them.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's often this narrative of like, in the real world, you don't get any accommodations. And I'm like, well, why not? That sounds like a not great role.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
Yeah. I mean, don't we all get accommodations in the real world? Actually, like, we do. And it's okay. Yeah. And don't we want to teach our kids that, like, oh, these are the accommodations that really help you.
Yes.
That help you thrive.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you working with adults, like, you're figuring out, wait, what are those accommodations that you didn't get as a child?
Right. And it's like, how can we advocate for those things? And advocacy is so hard. If you're starting with this belief that, like, I don't deserve things to help me, I have to do it by myself. So many students who have accommodations and don't use them. They're like, I don't want to bother anybody. Like, I don't want to, I have my diagnosis. I've been given these like recommended accommodations. I don't even use them because I don't want to do that. And it's like, you're allowed to have these things.
Yes.
And you should. And you
Oh
should
my
use them
gosh.
and like model having this. But you're having to overcome that belief that you're not allowed to have it. And so when parents get to model that, I think that's amazing.
Yes. And you're like, I'm just thinking of a memory of, I've had multiple neurodivergent, because I also work with neurodivergent adults. I've had multiple clients be like, oh yeah, I was supposed to get extended test time, but like they didn't give it to me. And so I just didn't say anything.
Yes.
And it's like, wow, this is so deeply ingrained, right?
Yes.
Even when you go through the steps of like getting those accommodations, like, right.
Yeah.
Filing your diagnosis with the school and
getting
like,
the diagnosis,
yes.
Filing the diagnosis.
Yeah. And you're still like, ooh, I don't want to bother anyone. Right? Everyone else is finishing this test in this time, so I should be able to do that too.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you shouldn't have to be able to do anything.
Yeah, like you literally have a difference with your brain. We had somebody else on the podcast talking about having like an auditory delay and how common that is with certain types of neurodivergent folks. And it was like, yeah, if they had a 15-second auditory delay, they would want an accommodation too. Like you're dealing with a real difference. This isn't just like everybody would like more time on a test. Does somebody have like an auditory delay and can't hear the instructions in real time? Like they need time.
Yes.
That's fair. That's allowed. And yeah, when you're having to just fight the internalized stigma of having that, it's so, like you said, it goes so deep.
Yes. And this is like totally off topic, but I hope one day we kind of like get rid of this idea of like timed tests. Because
Me
honestly,
too.
it just takes the pressure off. Like even people who really don't need the extra time, but as soon as you know it's timed, you're like, my anxiety's picking up, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, am I going to finish this in time?
Right. Oh my gosh, I feel like it's encouraging the kids who can go quickly to just breeze past. For so many kids, they're like breezing past going back and checking and going back and doing the things that could actually help them succeed. And then for the other kids who are dealing with that severe anxiety or the processing delays or whatever, it's just like, what a nightmare. And to what use? Like, when in life have you needed to know your multiplication really, really fast right now?
Yeah, never.
Yeah.
No one's quizzed me. I mean, maybe someone will tonight. I don't know.
Maybe.
But
It could be the day.
Yeah, today may be the day that my times table at rapid speed, was useful. Or like, I don't know, reciting the presidents and the 50
I need
states
to know it
and
now.
things like that. But yes.
But yeah, getting rid of the idea of time tests. I just think getting rid of the idea, I wish we could get rid of the idea that accommodations are like a special and exceptional thing. I think that so many people need access to this stuff. And so often what I'm finding, the more I'm like engaging with the neurodivergent community and doing advocacy, is like doing these things helps everybody. Like, for instance, something I'm talking about with companies is like having written instructions for things, like detailed written instructions for things. There's not just the assumption that like everybody knows how to do it exactly the same way. And it's like, couldn't everybody benefit from this?
Yes.
Do you think everybody walks in like automatically knowing how to do this the way that you want them to specifically? Like, don't we have a better process in line when like we all have this sort of accommodation? And just the idea that they're like this specialized thing that you need to feel bad asking for, I think is really frustrating. So yeah, model for your kids. When you're co-regulating, you can put in your earplugs. Is it okay for parents to take like, what if they, I don't know, do they need 5 minutes to calm down before? Like how can they be regulating themselves to help co-regulate?
Yeah. So I will tell parents, don't send your kid away. Right? But maybe it's, I have to walk away for 5 minutes. Maybe it's like, I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to come right back to you.
Oh, so like not necessarily being in the presence of your child, but not making them be the one to leave the room.
Yeah. Like, I'm not sending you away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, ooh, I'm noticing in my body.
I'm removing myself from this situation.
Yeah. So in my body, I'm not feeling well. I need to take 5 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. And even when I'm away from you, I still love you. And adding that, like,
That's so good.
I mean, imagine if like kids were able to hear that all the time.
And the process of explaining what's going on. Like, I'm noticing this thing in my body. Here's how I'm going to take care of it. Here's what's true the whole time.
Yes.
And then getting to take that time so that kiddo, I would sit and wonder as a kid, like, what that meant about our relationship. Like,
Yes.
that inherently feels like you don't love me anymore. You can't be around me. Like, I'm hard for you to be around. And instead
Yeah.
getting to name the, like, this is about me and my body. I'm like, I love you the whole time. And then we're going to come back and we're going to get to work through this together.
Yes. And it's so important in those like 5 minutes, that break, to really work on regulating yourself and not just going to shut down, right? If you've been in sympathetic and like, you're like, now I want to go back to that dorsal and I just want to shut down. Because keep the promise of going back. You know, that is so, so, so important. And I think by saying like, I love you this whole time, right? Even when I'm away and when I'm in the other room, I love you, is a way of kind of getting ahead of some of the thoughts of like, my mom can't even be around me. My dad can't even be around me, right? I'm alone. No one loves me. It's getting ahead of those things. Not to say that like it completely like eradicates them, but reminding your child that you love them and then being able to come back.
I was going to say that's why the follow through is really important.
Yeah.
Like, make promises you can keep when you're talking about coming back into the room.
Yes. Yes. And then, you know, it's not like you walk back in and necessarily want to have like hug time again. Now I will say there are some children who seek that touch, and there are some parents who absolutely cannot handle that right now.
Yes.
And I tell parents, you have autonomy on your of your body. You don't have to do something that's going to dysregulate you further. Like, the most important tool is for the parent to be regulated in that moment. So we don't need to do something that's going to dysregulate you further. So how can we set a boundary? Maybe it's like, you know, I can't be touched right now, right? But I can hold your hand, or it's I'll sit right next to you. I'll be close to you. I'm right here. And it's okay to set those boundaries with your kids.
Yeah. I think a lot of the times parents will put themselves through a situation that's so dysregulating. They like accept touch, even when they know that's not what they're ready to have in that moment. And then by the time they're through with it, either they're openly upset with their kid because they're so dysregulated, or their kid is openly sensing how much their parent is like holding back in that moment. And so much better from the start just to be like, ooh, I can't be touched right now, but I do want to be close to you. Like, I do love you and I do want to be close to you. Let's hold hands, or let's, you know, work on the same thing together, or whatever.
Yes, yes. And I mean, that's what we do in the play therapy room too. Like, my own regulation is extremely important, because if I'm not regulated, then the child's not going to be regulated.
Yeah.
And so, you know, making sure that I'm regulated throughout a session.
Yeah.
Same goes for the parent, right? You have to, it's just important to know that like the most powerful tool is your own regulation.
Yeah. What do you do to keep yourself regulated throughout the day when you might have a day that's really like up and down?
Well, I do have 15-minute breaks between my sessions, which is really nice.
Yep.
And sometimes that's cleaning up, you know, the playroom stuff. Sometimes it's like, you know, writing notes. But other times it's, ooh, I need to go walk outside and just like feel sun on my face. That's my go-to thing.
Yeah.
I think we all have like our go-to.
Oh yeah. I go to the back door, open it up. Great. This is great.
Yes.
Get some fresh water. Yeah,
yes. Drinking some water. Like, that's, yes. Drinking water and feeling the sun on my face, just smelling the fresh air is like crucial. And I think that having that time to like reset is, so every kid that comes in, like, I am refreshed.
Yeah.
Is so important.
Well, okay, I think that's a really important thing. I think parents can be afraid to like, one, they're not getting that time. They're not getting any alone time. So many times I'm hearing from parents who just don't feel like they ever get a free moment to themselves. But also the importance of like getting to take, I think, frequent breaks throughout the day, short amount of time, can be helpful. It doesn't always have to be like hours and hours of free time. I think that there's a lot to say for like a few minutes of getting the sun on your face and breathing before you have to go back and do that.
Yes, yes. Honestly, I think that's more important, right? Like, yeah, you go on date nights or like have weekends away. Absolutely. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that.
Right.
But like, what's going to get you through every single day?
Right, through every day as a parent.
Yes. Yeah, it's going to be those little moments.
I'm pretty sure I've read somewhere with polyvagal theory that like 15 to 20 minutes tends to be what it takes for our nervous system to switch states. So that feels like an important amount of time to sometimes be able to snag for yourself.
And I think that for some people, it's stretching. Other people, it's drinking water. It's sitting outside. What we don't want to do is take those 15 minutes and just scroll on our phone.
Right. Head into like shut down and just like zone out for 15 minutes. Because then you get to the end of that and you didn't have that time. Like you time traveled.
Yeah. And I feel like I've mentioned scrolling on the phone like a few times this episode just because it's so common. It's like, I just want to like sit down and I'm just going to relax for a minute.
So I notice myself doing that when I'm dysregulated between sessions. Sometimes I'll catch myself zoning out and being on my phone.
Yep.
Because it's just like, what requires no mental activity from me whatsoever is being on this thing and just like scroll. But then I don't feel better at the end of it. I'm not like, ooh, fresh for my next session.
No, you're like
I feel exactly like I did 10 minutes ago when I started.
You're like, okay, now I'm coming back into my body because I just zoned out for 15 minutes.
Right.
Where am I? Not in a good place. All right. Well, it's, it's 11 o'clock, so I got to start my next session. Yes. So it's, we talk about like this therapist stuff because I feel like it's so important for people to know that, like, we have to do these things too. We're doing the homework
We're
too.
human beings who are having to, like, help keep ourselves regulated and deal with the fact that, like, humans have dysregulated nervous systems sometimes. And we're both going to experience that. And that's why I think it's so applicable, especially as, like, a parent where you're in another role where it's key that you're regulating yourself to maintain that, like, connection. And another thing I find as a therapist is like, it's not always me like saying and doing the right things. It's so much about presence. It's so much about just being present and connecting that way. Yeah.
Just being with those be with attitudes that I talked about last time, right?
Yeah.
You're just being with your child.
Yeah.
And you're communicating that like you're there for them. I think that, again with parents, like, there's so much information. And I know that I've even spouted out a bunch of information, right? Like, there's so much. And I feel like parents are constantly feeling lost.
Yeah.
Because what's the right thing, right? There's like all these different things that are sometimes opposing. And then you're getting your family and your friends. And you're getting like, this Instagram account is telling you to do this. And then, I don't know, you pick up a book and you see that.
Right.
But like, it's just... It's so overwhelming.
It's so overwhelming. That's so much information to take in. It's so much conflicting like stories about what should be happening. And I think everybody's really ready to tell you how you're doing it wrong when you're a parent. Yeah.
Yes.
Really excited to do that. Not very excited to step in and like hold your kid for you for a minute. Like, much more excited to tell you how everything you just did was incorrect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, well, you should have done this.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't be like that. Right? Yeah. So I think that there's so much information. We're all like overwhelmed. But if I can, highlight the most important thing.
Yeah, kind of boil this down to some key things.
Yeah, it's that presence. That's that connection. Obviously trying to work on your own regulation, right? Because that's the most powerful tool. But that presence, and we're not talking about like, you have to say the right thing. You have to do all the right things. You just need to be with.
Yeah. No, that's the biggest thing. That's what I find again and again is that it's literally just being with. And I love the way that you describe that. In fact, will you describe what the be with attitudes is, what that means?
Yeah. So that's what we embody in the playroom. And we talked about it last time, but like just communicating that you're here, I hear you, I see you, I care, I understand,
Yeah.
and I delight in you.
Mm-hmm.
And so by just doing these skills of like maybe tracking, noticing
Yeah.
what kids are doing, deep breathing with them, sitting next to them, like your physical presence,
Mm-hmm.
maybe your like emotional presence, right? Like that relating to that feeling.
Yeah.
You are embodying these be with attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that not just in a state of dysregulation, right? When your child comes home from school and is like, you know, oh, I'm so excited, dad, like
Yeah.
I got to be line leader for the day,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Not just saying like, oh, great job, buddy,
Uh-huh.
but saying, oh, you're so excited about
Yeah.
that. Oh, you feel so proud of being line leader. And, oh, I wonder what that was like for you. You stood in front of the line, right?
Yeah.
And obviously using your own language. You don't need
Right.
to talk like I do,
Yeah.
right? but just like keeping that communication open and
Yeah.
like, I am so interested. Right now, the story that you're telling me is the coolest story I've ever heard.
Yeah, I have
And-
so much curiosity for you, so much delight in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's moments of upset where like, you know, I'm really upset. And so your goal isn't to be like, oh, well, you just need to get over it, right?
Yeah.
But the goal is to like, ooh, I hear you. You're really upset about that. You really wanted to go to get ice cream, and I told you that we can't today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you know, that sucks, right? For like a kid,
Right.
like that absolutely sucks.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's day ruining for me.
Yeah,
much
I
less-
mean, yeah.
I can drive
Let's be
myself to
real.
go get ice
Let's be
cream.
real.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, it's really just like giving your child that time, that connection, that attention.
Yep.
Yeah, being with.
So I'm really curious about, I think kind of maybe where I want to wrap this up is talking about being a parent of a neurodivergent teenager. I'm guessing that connecting is really important, instill those things, but what are some ways that parents can kind of use these skills for their older kids who are still dysregulated, still dealing with those sorts of things? Although also what you were saying before about noticing even being engaged with a kid when they're not dysregulated, but when they're regulated and just happy and excited about something. We know that, like, if the only time a child gets connection is when they're dysregulated, their system will protect them by keeping them dysregulated so that they get connection.
Yeah, we didn't even hit on that.
Yeah. And so just like keeping that in mind, if your kid is constantly dysregulated and that's the only time they get attention, their body loves them so much that it will keep them in a dysregulated state, which is not healthy for you to be able to live in. That can have a lot of, it's normal and natural to go into, not healthy to stay stuck in all the time, but their body loves them so much it will keep them dysregulated so that you will keep paying attention to them. Like, that's vital. That's how key and crucial that is. And so I think it's so important to know that, like, your regulated kiddos need connection too.
Yes. I feel like we could probably talk about that forever, but
Right.
yes, like just noticing, being with, like having those connections with your child, no matter what state they're in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you asked about teens.
Yes.
So teens are tricky. I usually have parents talk about like, oh, well, we can't connect, right? Because all they do is play video games. I get that a lot. And I am not video game savvy. Like, I'll be the first to admit, like, I stopped playing video games at Nintendo 64. And, like, that was it. Like, I played Donkey Kong, and, like, that was where I peaked, and there was nothing after that.
Are there still video games after all of that? Is there stuff now, or?
Yeah, I don't know, but apparently.
Okay.
Apparently. So I will be like, well, why don't you sit with them and play video games, right? Like, yes, it might be, like, physically painful, like, mentally painful, right? Maybe work on that regulation. It might be a time to, like, really, like, you know, really drive home those regulation skills that you have.
Also have your weighted blanket. Also have your fidget toys.
Yes. But take interest in what they're doing. It's the same idea, right? I gave the example of the little kid coming up to you and being excited about a line leader.
Yeah.
Look for the little things that your teenager is really excited about. So they're not going to run up to you and be like, I got line leader today. But they may start like really like geeking out over this new thing that they're really into.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Like there's your opening. There's the open door. Go do that.
Yeah, they're giving that to you, and like it's your opportunity to respond to that. Something that I'll say I notice a lot, because now I'm working with kids just a couple years past that, in their early 20s or whatever, talking about how important it is to kind of, I think, match that energy with a teenager, where I think teenagers can get really dysregulated or really defensive when they say something and they kind of drop it in casually, and the parent comes in at a whole different level, either like way too excited or way too angry and upset about it. And it's like, what I've noticed working with those kids is that I need to be curious and open. Oh, how was that? Oh, that's interesting. That's different. Okay, tell me a little bit more about that. Because a lot of times, kids who have been dysregulated a lot or haven't gotten the sort of connection that they need, or just it sucks being a teenager and life is hard, will like throw out a little crumb, and they're waiting to see how you respond. Are you going to freak out? Is this going to be too much for me? Am I now going to have to deal with your feelings? I'm not ready for that. And I think something that I wish parents of teens were thinking more about, as you know, one of the hundreds and hundreds of things you need to think about, but one of the things I wish they were thinking about was like, it's really important to now just be open and curious, that like delighting in and curiosity, but not necessarily more than that, not jumping in at a different level,
letting them lead.
Yes.
I think that it's so easy to get a teen to shut down. Like it's like it's sensitive. So like you're saying, if you're too interested, you're too excited, then they're like, whoa, pump the brakes here.
Right.
Or if they try to talk to you about a topic like sex, for example, and you start like freaking out, like, who are you having sex with, right? And then, that conversation's over.
Right, you're not talking about that anymore.
It's going nowhere. But I try to prep my parents for things like that. Like, I'll tell them, privacy is very important, go through the whole confidentiality spiel. But I say, like, I see your relationship with your child as so important. And so now, if I've assessed for safety in the home and things like that, there will be times where I will encourage your teen to talk to you about certain things. And the biggest thing I can ask you is just to stay curious, right? And not overdo it, right? Let's not shut down the conversation. Work on your own regulation, right? Like, I think of like sex as a topic because like that's a topic that is really something that parents like are like, oh my gosh, no. And like, valid. Like, I mean, you're like looking at your baby. That's not a baby, right?
Yeah,
like,
your infant child in front of you now talking about sex. Like, that's terrifying.
Like, okay, like, I get that. Like, like, it's... But I want them to get this information from you, right?
Yes.
Like, and keeping that communication open is so important. And so oftentimes I'll see, there's almost like, I've kind of observed, this is not like data founded, but I've kind of observed this window of like preteen where I see kids either like they'll start to like crave more attention from their parents, and it's very interesting watching like the parent's reaction. Does the parent respond to that, and then do they a couple years down the line like still have that close relationship, or is the parent in the state of like, I just don't have time for this, right? I'm not interested in what they're doing. Like, I don't know, go play with your friends,
right? Yeah,
right. And then that line of communication, we need to repair that. And so I really just always encourage, like, be interested in what they're interested in. Like, just, be cool about it.
Right. Be interested, but not too interested. Be excited, but not too excited. But absolutely. Yeah. That I think kind of trying your best to meet them where they're at, and remembering that not everything has to be resolved in a single conversation. I think that if you're teen brings up sex and you freak out about it, you're never going to have that conversation again. So there's this compulsion to like get out everything you need to in that moment. But if you're able to just be like curious, and we're just kind of talking about this now, and I don't know, it's casual, you're going to get to have the conversation again. Like, you're going to get to keep coming to that topic and talking around it. So you're going to get your own time to leave that conversation and to regulate and to co-regulate with other people in your life who you need advice from or whatever before you come back and approach that again.
Yes. And I will say, right? We're not perfect. So if you do have a freak out moment, like, okay, at a later date, go back to that conversation and like own up. Like, ooh, when you mentioned sex, I really shut down the conversation because I started thinking like, this is my baby. This is my little baby. And I didn't know what to do with myself. So I'm back, right? I've regulated myself. Did you have questions? Let's talk about this. And it might not be the first time. Your team might not be like, oh, thank gosh you came. Like, you came. Like, I'm so ready to talk about it now. They may be like, okay, you know, whatever.
Right.
But now they know, oh, okay, mom or dad, like, they came back. Like, they are, that door is open again. Like, it cracked open a little bit more. Yep. Or the same thing with, like, positive things, right? Like, oh, you know what? You were really telling me the other day about this new video game, and I was totally preoccupied, and I didn't talk to you about it. I'm really interested. Like, teach me about it.
Yeah.
Teach me. You get to be the teacher, the master, like the expert in this situation.
This is really good to know. I think there are so many opportunities to get it wrong. So many new scary conversations to have, or things you've never heard of, or whatever, that are just difficult to deal with. And like, if you've missed an opportunity, whether it's a young kid or a preteen or a teen, like, you can reapproach that, and like repair can be made. Your kids never stop wanting to connect with you. And even my kids who are now no longer kids, who are like way down the road, 20s, 30s, 40s, there's always a part of them that like longs for that connection, longs for that parent, I think, to still show up and be like, listen, I really freaked out for like 18 years, but I'd like to be, you know? I think there's that internal part of us that like biologically drives us to want those things. And it doesn't mean that it's perfect overnight, but just know that like, if you're a parent of a neurodivergent teen and you didn't get access to all this great information that we have now when they were growing up, there's still time to like learn to co-regulate. There's still time to learn to be interested in the things that they're interested in. You don't have to have gotten it right from the start. You don't have to get it right every time now.
Yes, absolutely. There's always room for repair.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also so great to model that to our kids.
Yes, exactly.
Like, it's not all or nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, ooh, you know, I fumbled that. You know, let's go back to it.
Moments that I'm so grateful for as a therapist that I was not taught in school is that a couple of times early on, and still to this day, but I can remember a couple of times early on where I just got something wrong. I just don't think I responded in the way that I wish I had, or I came from a different kind of model that I just, you know, have stopped believing in or whatever. And getting to come back and own that, you can watch the shift happen in front of you. It doesn't mean in that moment they're like, okay, now I feel perfectly ready to open up. But like, moving forward, things were different because they knew that when I got it wrong, or if they called me out for getting something wrong, that like that mattered to me. And we were going to change something. We didn't have to do it because it was my way or the highway, you know?
Yes.
Do you have any other general, you wish all parents of neurodivergent kids knew something, or you have some encouragement for them?
A lot of things. But to like sum it up, I think that just going back to the repair, there's always room to repair. And the biggest thing that your kids are looking for is just you. That connection. And so while maybe you don't get the ACT in the right order, maybe you don't like have the special playtime for 30 minutes, maybe you don't have the exact toy that the CPRT group recommends, and like these are all like evidence-based things, right? So it's not like just willy-nilly information, right? Like, this is evidence-based.
Like, this stuff matters. The ACT order matters. Like, those things matter. But like you said, there's room for repair. And there's room for like imperfection and for modeling something different.
And so in CPRT, we do talk, there's like this quote, Gary Landreth is like, oh, focus on the donut, not the hole. And we talk about that for children. And then we also apply it to the parents. So focus on like not what's missing, but what's there. And then as therapists, when we're trained to do the CPRT, we're also told, hey, remember, focus on the donut, not the hole. Don't point out to the parent everything that they're doing wrong, right? Or if they miss this opportunity to do this. Focus on what's there.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's like cheesy, but like whatever. That it kind of boils down to that. Like there's focus on what's there. Like there's so much information, and what it boils down to is your kid wants you.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Focus on the donut, not the hole. That's great. Okay, well, thank you so, so much. I'm so glad we got to come do this in person. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I love being here.
This is great. We'll do it again sometime.
Yes.
So there we have it. That's the full convo that took place in our Airbnb in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we got to meet up with Courtney and her husband, Philip.
We got to track them down and meet them at their homes.
They were very surprised to see us. We broke in like thieves in the night. They're like, "What are you doing here? And why do you have microphones?"
What's all this equipment for?
But Courtney, thanks so much for spending that weekend with us and coming and participating and sharing kind of your expertise on working with and raising neurodivergent kids. I know it was helpful to me to listen to and get a better understanding of how that relationship can really be a beautiful thing between a parent and a neurodivergent kid.
Absolutely. I think it's given me a lot to think about, and it's a really healing one, even on the other side of that.
Okay, well, Ash, thanks so much for your time.
Price, thank you for your time.
And we will see you next time on I Married Your Therapist. Okay, so we're using your new fancy iPhone to record this.
Yeah, we're doing things a little different this time.
This iPhone has like a 48 megapixel camera.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what that means. I just feel like I would have been very happy with like a 1 megapixel camera.
Yeah.
What is a megapixel?
I don't know.
Is it like a giant pixel?
I was going to say it sounds huge.
I think that this technology might be completely wasted on us.
Way wasted on us.